When I was working on my doctorate at the University of Virginia, they told me I had to have several minors. So I was working on a degree in higher education, and I thought, what are the areas that I know the least about? And business was one of them. So they arranged for me to minor in business out of the Darden Business School, which is one of the top-ranked business schools in the country. However, I first of all had to go see the dean and get his permission as an outsider to take courses. Then I had to go to each professor and ask their permission to take their course. So the first course I took was the management of nonprofit organizations. So I'll wait just a second till I finish the story. What did I just say? The management of nonprofits. And at the University of Virginia Darden School, all of the classes are case study. So the first class, I read 75, 80 pages related to blind people and all the organizations that work with blind people. Well, in class, it's very intimidating. They have these levels with desks, and you put a sign in front of you with your last name. So I'm thinking, I'm an outsider. There is no way the professor will call on me in the first class. Class begins. He said, Mr. Dobson. My heart sank through the floor. Mr. Dobson, if you were God, what would you do about blind people? Well, I'm a pastor, a preacher, so I said, if I were God, I'd heal them. And nobody laughed. Not a single person. I thought it was hilarious. But not them. So I want to acknowledge my bias up front. That's good research. I'm a Jesus follower. I believe in the Bible, and I'm trying my best to live it out. So if you'll turn that way, I want to show you a short video clip. 10 years ago, next month, I was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. It's degenerative. That means over time it gets worse and worse and worse. It's incurable. There's no known cause. There's no known cure. And it's terminal. They gave me material to read and said, basically, you have 2 to 5 years to live. And of that 2 to 5 years, most of it will be in a disabled condition. It's where the neurons in the nerve endings die. So the electrical signal from your brain to your muscle quits working, and the muscle quits working. So 10 years later, I'm a tad happy to be here today. They recently told me at the University of Michigan that statistically, I am more likely to get run over by a bus than to die of ALS. So when I was in New York City on a book tour, I was very careful about stepping off the curb. So I want to talk briefly with you about courage in the face of overwhelming circumstances. What's it like to get diagnosed? It's like you're walking in the sunshine and the warmth and the beauty and the laughter of kids. And all of a sudden, you descend down into a tomb where it's dark, claustrophobic, and so far from the life you once knew. And when you're in the tomb, you have a choice. You can lay down, give up, or you can take some steps toward the light. And what I want to talk about are some of the steps that I have taken toward the light. Right after I get diagnosed, I'm sitting home alone on the porch. It's snowing, and I'm thinking, this will be my last winter. This will be my last Christmas. And I am sinking more and more into despair and into darkness. So I do what a pastor does. I pick up the Bible. Now, I know not all of you will agree with the steps I'm taking, so at any point feel free to chuck out anything I'm saying. So I pick up the Bible and I'm reading from the Torah, from the writings of Moses. And he's coming to the end of his life. It's Deuteronomy. And he's giving his final speech to the people of Israel. And he says, you have a choice to make. I'm going to paraphrase it. You can live or you can die. If you choose to follow the Torah, you will live. If you choose to ignore the Torah, you will die. And as I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, you know, I have the same kind of a choice. I can choose to die, lay down, give up, and give in to this disease. Or I can choose to live. And as I'm sitting there on the porch with the snow coming down, I prayed a simple prayer. God, help me to live. make the kind of choices that would promote living, not dying. The second thing I did is I have offended a lot of people in my life. When Selma introduced me, graduating from Bob Jones, which is to the right of every school on the face of the earth, having worked for Jerry Falwell, most of you were thinking, what the heck is this guy here speaking today? But after I left Jerry Falwell, I wrote a book called Blinded by Might: Why the Religious Right Can't Save America. And I decided, I know you're into politics, but I decided as a preacher, live out your faith in your own community and avoid, if at all possible, politics. So Jerry Falwell was highly offended at my book. So I'm thinking, I need to call him and apologize, knowing that Jerry Falwell would assume he was right and I was wrong, and I knew all along I was right. But I decided, you know, relationship is way more important than who's right and who's wrong. Over the years at Calvary Church, we ended up letting a lot of staff go. And so I made a list, called everyone up, and asked their forgiveness. I decided if I'm going to die, I'm at least going to die with a clear conscience. I also learned to give thanks. When I resigned from Calvary Church, we knew we needed to go to church somewhere. So we chose the Messiah Missionary Baptist Church, the largest African American church in our community. When my wife and I started attending, we doubled the minority population. It went from 2 white people to 4 white people. And I learned at Messiah that black people pray differently than white people. Whether it's the pastor, a deacon, a kid, when they pray, they say something like this: Dear God, thank you for waking me up this morning. Thank you for the measure of strength you have given me to be in the house of prayer. Now, I've been around white people all my life. I have never, ever, ever heard a white person pray, God, thank you for waking me up this morning. So I began to think, why is it African Americans pray so differently than white people? And I've concluded that they have a long history of struggle, from slavery to civil rights to racism to discrimination, which, by the way, is very much alive in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And because of their long history of struggle, they have learned to be grateful for the little stuff. Like, Lord, thank you for waking me up this morning. Thank you for the measure of strength you have given me to be here today. I also learned from my Jewish friends the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed are you, God, our God, King of the universe. And if you're eating a meal, you say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Blessed are you, God, our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. And throughout the day, deeply religious Jews bless God for everything, including, this will gross you out, the cleansing of the colon, which, by the way, is a very important thing to do. So they bless God for everything in life. And so I've learned from both Jews and African Americans the importance of being grateful. Well, I think I'll quit here and just open it up for questions or comments or rebuttals or arguments, whatever you want. Yes.
I just wanted to know, like, on a personal level, like, what's your, your daily routine? Or, do you pray every morning? What's your favorite passage in the Bible for you? Do you have focus?
Wow, that's a great question. That changes over time. During the year that I tried to live like Jesus, I listened to the 4 Gospels every week. So I quit listening to Pink Floyd, Dropkick Murphy, U2, Van Morrison, all my favorite bands, and I listened to the Gospels for a year. About halfway through, actually, I was sick of listening to the Gospels. So I thought I'll go out on the porch and listen to Pink Floyd. And they have a song, the lunatic is in the grass, the lunatic is in the grass, the lunatic is in, they have a way with words. But the one verse goes, the lunatic is in my brain. And I thought, maybe the lunatic is in my brain. Maybe this whole experiment is crazy. And then I thought, well, maybe the lunatic is Jesus. And so I vary in my reading and in my praying. I've tried lately to pray more formal prayers, like the Lord's Prayer, the blessing in Hebrew, those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Yes?
I wonder if you could tell us more about your year of trying to live like Jesus. where did you go? What did you do? I'm sure something right about
I tried to do three things. To live like Jesus would have lived. So I went to the synagogue, observed Shabbat, ate kosher. Now, I didn't wear a robe and sandals. I did let my beard grow. It was halfway down my chest. So I tried to live Jewishly. Then I tried to think like Jesus. And then I tried as best as I could to obey Jesus' teaching. For example, Jesus says, I was a stranger and you took me in. So I'm thinking, how do I do that? So I decided for a period of time I'd pick up hitchhikers and take them wherever they wanted to go. So it's snowing, bitter cold. I leave the house, turn the corner, and there's an African-American guy, 6'4", 6'5", 300 pounds, walking down the middle of the road. So I stop, roll down the window, say, hey dude, do you need a ride? So he gets in, buckles, looks at me and says, you're a little white guy. What are you doing picking up a guy like me? And I wanted to say, I'm trying to live like Jesus. But I didn't. I said, dude, it's cold and you look like you needed a ride. And I had already agreed wherever he wanted to go, I'd take him. So I was hoping it wasn't Detroit. He said just a few blocks. So I tried as literally as possible to obey Jesus' teaching. So I went to the bar, drank beer, talked to people about Jesus, did all sorts of bizarre and weird things, hopefully in the spirit of Jesus, though not always.
Could you say what took the most courage, if you have any stories that related to courage during that year?
Yeah. I've always struggled with how do you pray when you're terminally ill. I mean, my understanding of God is he could heal me, though nobody with ALS has ever been healed. So I would be the one and only if God did that. And some of my well-meaning friends said, if you have enough faith, God will heal you. And I'm like, dude, I don't have that kind of faith. And so I've always struggled with what to pray. And during the year of living like Jesus, I came across Bartimaeus, who when he hears that Jesus is passing, cries out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And for the first time, I had the courage to pray that, leaving myself at the mercy of God. That was a significant turning point. You asked the question about courage. Having my long beard, people prejudged who I was. They either thought I was homeless or a leftover hippie, or part of ZZ Top, or I was playing golf one day when the beard was long, it was blowing in the breeze, and I got out of the car and the golf pro leaned over to my friend and said, "Who is that? The Unabomber?" So I discovered a long beard. At least in America, people prejudge you. In the Middle East, it's a sign of respect and honor, but not in America. Yes?
I have a comment and then a question. One of our leadership fellows who's not with us today is Anna Raveshot, and her mother was in a very serious accident this week. And so all of you, if you want to send an email to her, she's struggling right now. But she bought and read your book and said that she took it today and put it on top of the stack of books for her mother to read. So that's my comment. My question is, you could have gone through this year living like Jesus privately. By writing a book, you were meaning to influence people. And my question, I guess, is what was your intention in publishing that book for all of us to read?
Actually, I never intended to write a book about it. I was 3 months into the journey and was meeting with a friend who's in the publishing business. And I was telling him about what I'm learning. He said, "You absolutely need to write a book." So I never intended to write the book. I would say my intent in writing the book was to appeal to people who don't like religion, but they're interested in Jesus. And I've met and lots of people like that over the years who aren't into organized religion, but they're kind of into Jesus. So my theory was, what if I abandoned all of the theological constraints and just took Jesus at his word? What would it look like? So that's kind of the story of the book. Yes?
Thank you for coming and speaking to us. My question is, through your experience, the year-long experience, did you find that we in our society put unnecessary constraints on ourselves? For example, you give the example of the picking up hitchhikers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that we as a society put, for example, a lot of fear, and we're just putting a lot of constraints on what we do and how our relationship with other people is? So was that a liberating experience for you, or?
Yeah, I would say that it was very liberating. In the sense that all organized religions have their own cultural do's and don'ts. And for the first time, I didn't have to buy the whole package. And I found that to be liberating. Even though during the year I went to the African American church, and I didn't like everything they did, and I'm sure they didn't like everything I did, but I did find it to be liberating. All of religion, I'm not going to be precise and technical here. Most religions have cultural biases that are American, European, African, whatever, South American, Middle Eastern, and their cultural, what I call preferences, are elevated to the status of core beliefs. And I was trying to sort through that in my journey. Yes, sir.
Can you talk a little bit about the role that doubt plays in your faith and maybe in your leadership?
Oh, that's a great question. When I was in college, I was studying liberal theologians so that when I came to class, they could give me all the answers. But I found the answers they were giving me didn't add up. And that liberal theologians captured the spirit of Jesus better than people at Bob Jones University. So I really struggled. And I remember one night I went out under a tree and took my Bible. And I didn't know if I was going to abandon the whole thing or believe the whole thing. And after several hours, I said to God, look, I have a lot of questions about this Bible and about your character. But I'm going to accept it by faith. And I'll spend the rest of my life working out the doubts. And some of them I've worked out, some I haven't. I don't think faith is the absence of doubt at all. When I was at the University of Virginia, the chair of my committee, who grew up fundamentalist and didn't believe anything, he said to me one day, what if in your research you come to a conclusion that directly contradicts the Bible? What will you do? And I said, well, I cannot deny the conclusions of scientific inquiry, nor can I deny the Bible. So I will believe both and work toward reconciling them. But if I can't reconcile them, I'll still believe both. So doubt, I have great doubts now about my journey, about God, about where He is. But overall, I still trust Him. To me, that's the issue. Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting idea that you left a national focus group to live out your beliefs in a community.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that that could be applied to anyone, not just a pastor. Could you talk about just the idea of being part of a community and living out your beliefs in it, and what kind of impact that would have on you and where you live?
Yeah, 6 years ago, my wife and I decided that we would take in young people at my age. You all are young. College and graduate students, and we would live together in community. So I think the first year there were 9 total in our community. We ate 3 meals together, we shared resources, we studied the Bible, we prayed, we had house meetings, we did life together, and that will mess you up. There is nowhere to hide when you're living in community. And now after 6 years, we have basically had enough. No, it's very challenging, but at the same time, it was good, because it was during that time that I resigned from the church. It was during that time my youngest son did 2 tours in Iraq, compliments of the Army. And so living in community sustained both Lorna and me during very difficult times. Knowing you had to show up was good. Yeah, Selma?
This might be a little personal, but I imagine you appreciate candor.
Sure.
I grew up in, my dad is a preacher, he's an evangelical preacher, and I've run into a lot of Christians. I grew up around Christians. And suffice it to say, you've probably heard it many times, you don't appear, you seem much more unorthodox than most Christians that I've heard. Very unorthodox. So I guess I'm curious about your transition from being a national figure to being much more community-based. And I think I'd like to hear maybe your wife's perspective, or what you went through as a unit during this time as you were, struggling and finding a new path for yourself. How did that weigh on your relationship?
You want to answer that?
Not really. They give you a half hour and give me 30 seconds. Not fair. Not fair.
When I worked for Falwell, I traveled all over the country, was from the Phil Donahue Show to Time Magazine, quoted constantly. And all of that is semi-addictive. When I moved to Grand Rapids, I refused all media interviews. I'm thinking 3, maybe 4 or 5 years. I refused to talk to the media because I wanted to figure out, what does it mean to be a pastor in the local community? So 20 years ago, we began working with people with HIV/AIDS here in Grand Rapids. We adopted the worst elementary school, gave them a grant to upgrade their library, provided volunteers to help with weeding. We formed a coalition with 12 African American pastors called the Emmanuel Empowerment Corporation. And I discovered that living out your faith where God has put you is far more transforming than running all over the country arguing about politics. So, yeah.
I'm interested to hear you talk a little bit more about just that. I think, unfortunately, the Christian right has a very loud voice in this country, and members of the Christian community who counterbalance the religious right aren't very loud. And so I'm wondering for you what that looks like at the community level, what kind of conversation is happening within the Christian community, and do you fear the connotation that is now being applied to Christianity, and is it turning people away from Christianity, associating the religion with this religious right movement?
Whoa! I don't know if you watch God in America, the PBS series that was just on. In the last segment, they interviewed me about my days at the moral majority. I think the religious right does more harm to the real teachings of Jesus and makes it far more difficult to reach out to hurting people. Unfortunately, in America, the loudest end up getting the press. I voted for Mr. Obama, and that forever cut me off with any relationship with the religious right. I'm glad Falwell was not alive, because he would have called me up and said, "Were you crazy or stone drunk?" My view, and I know this is the Center for Presidential Studies, my view is that real change happens when people of faith live out their faith in their community and touch hurting and struggling people. And that politics is necessary. I don't even know if I'm going to vote 3 weeks from now. If you believe everything on the commercials, there ain't nobody worth voting for. But I probably will. But again, faith is lived out best in the local community. Yes?
So you talk about, you've emphasized several times dealing with people who are struggling, hurting lives. And my question to you is, I think everybody in this room would admire you or any individual who says, okay, I'm going to pick myself up out of that dark place. What do you do? This is the question of evil. What do you do when it is somebody you love who is in that dark place, especially a child? Tell me how you deal with that particular problem.
Wow. I should have stopped the questions. I think you help them, you encourage them, and you do whatever is necessary to help them get out of the pit. One of the points I didn't bring up is that God uses each of us to help each other. It's back to the whole idea of community. That if a child is in the ditch, you and whoever else do what you can to help them. Yes?
I have a question somewhat similar, building off of that, and it's fairly personal. A good friend of mine, his father was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's about 10 years ago, and he just recently passed away in the last couple of weeks. As a result, he has lost his faith completely because of his father's illness. What would you say to him, or what did you say to your family?
I would say to him, it ain't over yet. That I can understand how people lose their faith when life falls apart. And I talk to a good number of people with ALS who have abandoned their faith. Recently I talked to a man and he said, I wish I could believe like you, but I can't. patience, prayer, living out your faith. All of those are ways that help the person regain their faith. But I do understand why you lose it. Yes?
I want to apologize for the frankness of the question before I even ask it. But,
Sure.
I don't know anybody before this who has had ALS, and I doubt that I ever will again, just because of the small percentage of people that are afflicted. I'm wondering, as the disease continues to degenerate, and perhaps one day you're being kept alive by machines, yet still a lucid, intelligent individual. What will motivate? What will you ascribe meaning to then? Or I realize the difficulty of the question, but it's a position that not too many people have to be in, unfortunately.
Well, here's my life goal: to speak as long as I can, then to write as long as I can, then to live as long as I can. And I try not to think about the circumstances that you raise. I figure, well, Jesus said, don't worry about tomorrow. I'm like Jesus. Get a life. So I try not to think about that often. And I figure when and if I get there, God will help me at that point. But I can influence my family, my grandkids, the people around me, even if I can't speak. By the way, the other lesson I learned, when I left Calvary Church, I had a cell phone that rang constantly. And I threatened to go throw it in the Grand River. And the day after I resigned, it didn't ring one time. I kept checking it to make sure it was working. And when I left, my family left with me. So your family, your significant other, your spouse, your kids, they are top priority. And I think I can influence them as my disease continues. I've lost track of time. Please?
We have time for one more question.
Yes, sir.
I could be wrong, so correct me if I am, but I get the impression that you had a conversion experience from orthodoxy to unorthodoxy, from conventional thinking to unconventional. Is that the case? And what was the process of becoming more unconventional in your thinking? Or were you a rebel at Bob Jones University and did Jerry Falwell adopt you and afford you opportunities because you were much more conventional in your thinking, or you loved your unconventional ways, or what's
No.
the process that you liked in terms of orthodoxy?
I've always been a rebel at heart. And I have been banned from the campus at Bob Jones. I'm not allowed back on the campus. If I come on the campus, I'll get arrested. I've thought of trying that, but that would be in the flesh. At Jerry Falwell's, I wore Doc Martens before they were in, while they were in, and after they were in. Doc Marten boots. I have Doc Marten shoes on. It was my quiet way of saying I don't fit here. The closest fit was Calvary Church. But I've always been a bit of a rebel. When someone says you can't do that, I usually set out to try it. So I think I've never quite fit. Maybe it's because I grew up in Ireland and immigrated when I was a teenager. And so I never quite, even though I have an American accent, when I go back to Ireland, it's like I've come home. So maybe it's immigration, being a rebel. I'm still trying to figure out what it means to follow Jesus. I haven't figured it out yet. I hope to before I die.